Hi, welcome to another episode of Community Pulse. My name is Jason Hand, and I can be found on Twitter at Jason Hand.
Hey there, everyone. It's Mary Thingval, Mary_Grace on Twitter.
And I'm PJ Haggerty, and I can be found at Esplenic on Twitter.
And thank you for joining us. It's been a little bit of a few minutes, a few months, hours, a few long times since we've all been on the call together and doing one of these podcasts. Unfortunately, I think it's gotten super, super busy for all three of us. I know for myself, I've just had a ton of travel for work for Victor Ops and literally just have not had a moment to try to record one of these. But now that sort of the travel conference season is over, at least for me, I'm looking forward to trying to get some more content going and some more episodes recorded. And I think we've got some pretty good ideas for 2018, but maybe we can go around the horn and everybody can share kind of what's been going on lately. Yeah, we'll start with you, Mary.
Sure. So just a few changes for me, nothing, major. But I left my job at SparkPost back at the end of October, and I've been out doing stuff on my own for a little while. So I've got a couple different clients that I'm working with, doing some consulting, some contracting, digging into some of the side projects I've been neglecting as well, working on finishing up my book on the business value of developer relations and getting moving on that, which makes my editor very, very happy. We'll talk more about that in a little bit, but working on that and then hoping to invest some more time in the podcast. I know we want to be doing things on a more regular basis, and a lot of what we've been struggling with is just keeping things on track and keeping it organized. So I'm hoping to pick up some of that responsibility coming up here in a bit.
Okay. For me, it's kind of actually a similar story to Mary's. I left the company I was working for and started a dev relations as a service business called DevRel.io. And it's been interesting. It's growing a lot faster than I expected it to. So it's been a lot of fun, but also similar to what you were saying, Jay, like lots of travel, lots of, exotic locations. I think I've been to 7 different countries this year, including Canada. I think some people have heard of this Canada before.
It's a very exotic location.
It's crazy. It's great. The people are so different. They're all polite and also sorry. But yeah, I mean, it's been crazy. I think that kind of fed into the missing out on a few episodes here and there that we could have done. But I think 2018 is going to be our comeback year, and we're going to do better. We're all going to be in a better place. We're all going to be happier and have more time to spend on this wonderful podcast that we do.
Continuous improvement. Always looking for ways to make this better.
Exactly.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, it's been.
And that leads to continuous deployment, which is the thing that we've been lacking.
That's true. We haven't quite figured out how to do that. So
that's where I come in, building the processes for that.
Yeah. Yep. So, and for me, it's just been a busy time. This like Q3 getting into Q4 period. I think I've been on the road or been someplace outside of the Boulder, Denver area, like 7 of the last 8 weeks. So it's been a long, exhausting journey, but here we are getting into the holidays. It feels good to actually be at my home, hanging out with my pets, sleeping in my own bed.
Right. I think we're all at home this time, which
yeah,
I don't know the last time that happened.
I think it was last January when we did like the first episode of this series. The last time we were all at home.
It's entirely possible.
Meanwhile, everybody listening is like, oh, poor them. They get to go all over the place. And
it's interesting you bring that up, because I think that one of the things that people forget is the journey that gets you to the fun and exotic locations. They don't realize that, even just to drive, sometimes you're stuck in traffic for 4.5 hours for a 45-minute drive, or that, I think when we did the travel episode in December of last year, Jason, you talked about the fact that every restaurant in the Detroit airport, because everyone goes to the Detroit airport, and which side of the rave tunnel, the Wendy's is at. It's these, you understand. Yes, you understand the ins and outs of Airbnb and Uber and Lyft and all of the various travel things. You are a member of every airline. Because
And the front desk people at your favorite hotels know you by name. Or,
exactly.
for me, know Ember by name. So that works too.
Well, actually, we were going to talk about maybe putting Ember on the podcast instead of you.
Yeah.
We're going to put you in more of a director role.
I see how it is. I see.
Less of an on-screen presence.
Same comp for now, though. We can talk later.
All right. All right.
Your end of your review is coming up.
Thanks.
But speaking of reviews, let me ask both of you. I don't want to say best event of the year because I feel like that's unfair. We all three of us get to go to a lot of great events, and I don't want to diminish any of them. But what was maybe your favorite event or favorite activity at an event that you had this year?
Gosh, for Mary, you got one off the top of your head? I'm still have to think about this.
I'm gonna come out the gate with cheesy and say DevOps Days Rockies was awesome because it was the first time that all three of us were together.
That's true.
Ever. And I think maybe the first time that the two of you had ever met in real life. So,
yeah, it was.
Uh-huh.
So that definitely tops my charts for this year.
Yeah, and we're starting to kick off planning for that for the next one too now. So
nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
I agree. That was fun. Just it's fun, but it's also sad because it's such a busy time. For me as one of the organizers, I want to be able to spend time with everybody that's there, but it's not possible. But it was really awesome to get all three of us together and see everybody on stage and talk about what's going on. So yeah. Meanwhile, you can hear my dog slurping water over here. Put him outside.
Real life.
For me, my favorite event, I don't know, like reInvent's always just a big mess. It's in Vegas. It was 40,000 plus people this year, all up and down the strip. But it's just such a, I don't know, it's a crazy event. There's nothing like it. And it's always at the end of the year and everybody's really stressed out, but also everybody's sees that light at the end of the tunnel. And definitely I can say, like, for me, being sort of at the booth and having a ton of conversations right at the end of the year is really, really sort of rewarding. And then being with my team, a lot of us go to that event and we get to sort of enjoy sort of, I don't know, wrapping up a good year for us. I don't know, there's just a lot of like team building and spending time with, people that you care about, you spend a lot of time with. I don't know. It's just, for me, it's not the event itself. It's just that there's so many of us from my company there together, and it was pretty cool. But I would also say, in terms of just like what was my most enjoyable conference, just from a conference standpoint, I think probably going out to Amsterdam. Actually, their DevOps Days was one of the more unique ones. They've been doing it longer than a lot of the other ones, and so I've taken some things, some ideas from them that I hope to implement to DevOps Days Rockies this year. And yeah, I don't know. We were talking before the recording here. I think I'm around 30 events for this year. I haven't quite wrapped my head around where all I've been and which ones were good and which ones weren't, but it was a good year overall.
Yeah, awesome. I think my favorite event from a conference standpoint was probably Codeland, which is happening for a second time in 2018. But it's this incredible conference that brings together folks who are relatively new to the coding industry. And it's run by a one-woman show, Saran, and she's amazing. And she runs Code Newbies, the podcast, the Twitter chats that happen once a week, all of that. And it was an incredible conference from a speaker aspect, from a diversity aspect, from a just freaking cool people there. And she's done such an amazing job nurturing that community and bringing those people together and making sure that it's diverse and good people and good standards all along the way. She's actually someone that I would love to have on the podcast and talk to her about how she built that community and what's different about it and how it works. But it was a really, really cool event, and I'm excited that they're doing it again this year. So
that's awesome.
What about you, PJ? What was your favorite event from the year?
Well, it's kind of, I kind of have two, and I know that goes completely against the concept of the word favorite, but I'm going to say two anyway. I went to Web Summit this year and had an amazing time. I was talking to Jason earlier, And I haven't done quite as many as hit. I did about 27 events this year. And Web Summit it's always interesting. There's 60,000 people. It's in Lisbon, Portugal. It's absolutely insane. But the highlight kind of was I got to meet Gary Kasparov, who's a grand chess master, and I got to play against him. And while that's not techie, that was probably one of the coolest things I've done all year. But as far as conferences go, for the first time in a couple of years, just because of work and moving off in other directions, I was lucky enough that one of my new clients wanted me to go to RubyConf for them. And I haven't been to RubyConf in years, but RubyConf is always, I've always been a big part of the Ruby community. I've always loved the Ruby community. It's the most open arm and about to give you a hug community I've ever been involved in. So I was thrilled to go. It was in New Orleans, which is always an amazing time. We had a wonderful karaoke party, of course, because
always when PJ's around, karaoke,
it just happens. It just kind of magically happens. But yeah, like it was wonderful to be in that community and see old friends and make some new friends and see that, it's still a growing thing and not so much, it's not the new hipness anymore, but it's still a wonderful community to be a part of, and they're doing great things there. So RubyConf in New Orleans was definitely a lot of fun.
So that's actually an interesting note. You mentioned Ruby isn't the new hipness anymore, and that's been something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and it's kind of community related and kind of programming related and just interesting. One of the things that I think we face at every company, or at least most companies with an API, or most companies trying to dig into a particular audience, is, well, which developers, which ops folks, which people do we talk to? What languages do we target? Which groups do we reach out to, right? And I think we tend to go after, well, what are the most popular languages?
Right.
But it always seems to sway towards what are the most popular languages that are the new hit languages and the new interesting ones. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the stats, and who knows how accurate the stats are, as always, but if you look at the stats, things like Java and C# and those are still at the top of the charts as far as things that are most often used.
Well, I think the interesting thing there is, because I'm assuming when you talk about top of the charts, you're talking about the TIOBE chart.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the gold standard in what's being used. Mm-hmm. But the one little thing I've always been able to kind of see as a whole in the TIOBE charts is it doesn't account for size of company using it. So if you say, 500 million people are using C#, mm-hmm. That's great. How many of them work at Microsoft?
Fair.
Take that into account. Then, take that. How many are working at IBM? Like, if you're looking at big, huge companies, sure. If you're looking at a 10 developer dev shop, they're probably using mm-hmm. Go or Elixir or Ruby.
Right.
Because A, it's free, and open source software is always easier for a startup. Mm-hmm. And B, it's something that has a lot of documentation behind it. It's a lot easier to use. So I love TIOBE. I think it's a great informational resource, but take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does GitHub or any tool similar to GitHub, do they track that kind of stuff?
They do.
So when you do a GitHub search, you can search by, sort this by language. Tell me how many, I want to see all repos that mention Spark posts that have, Ruby link or Ruby code in them, right? Mm-hmm. So you can go through and sort by those things. And that's an interesting way to do it too, right? Because then you get the open source side of things as well as the popularity, if you will. Mm-hmm. And again, you still deal with size of company and things like that. But one of the interesting things that we ran into right before I left Spark Post was we had someone, and we tracked this on a regular basis, tell me how many repos either mentioned in the title or the description mention Spark Post and aren't created by the Spark Post org. And then we'd manually filter out the employees as well. And then we'd go through and go, okay, cool, there's X number that are written in JavaScript, X number that are written in Ruby, X number that are written in Java, and kind of go through and like lump those together. So if it was a JavaScript framework, it would go under the JavaScript umbrella. But someone wrote one, they wrote a cold fusion wrapper for our API. Right. And wow. For those of you who are listening, you can't see the looks that I just got from Jason and PJ.
For those of you on the video, you totally know why.
Right, exactly. But it was fascinating because we sat there and laughed about it for a moment or two and went, ha ha, well, we probably won't be writing a blog post about that. And then I went, hang on, hold up. Because if someone's writing a cold fusion wrapper, turns out maybe people actually need a cold fusion wrapper, because think about how many companies are still running on code that they can't get rid of yet, right? Legacy code that's stuck, that they don't have the time to work through it. They don't have the time to switch it over. And they need to be able to use these APIs in languages, in frameworks, in things that work with the current software that they are running.
Well, I mean, I've been to a lot of events and things where people, especially meetups, where people they're interested in PHP or Ruby or whatever, and that's what they do kind of on the side. But they're also AS400 experts, and that's what they do with their day job, or or Cold Fusion or other things. Cobalt. If you're a Cobalt developer, you're going to be a millionaire in about 5 years, because all of these banks don't know how to transition systems. So if an open source language like Python, for example, and Cobalt, and you can move Cobalt systems to another space, you're going to make a lot of money, and then you can do some wonderful conference talks about how horrible it is to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, at some point, I think I'd love to get like, cool, who's one of the top community folks in Cold Fusion? Who's one of the top community folks in JavaScript? Who's one of the top community folks in Ruby? Who's one of the, and kind of do like a panel of where did these come from and how did the community start and what changes have you seen in the community as these other languages have started coming up?
Right.
It's fascinating to have that conversation and see what came out of that.
We ought to we ought to put something in the collective Slack group and see if we can get some names tossed around. But also, if there's anybody listening and you can think of somebody, or maybe that person is you, let us know. I think one of the things we know we want to try to do, into 2018 is definitely get onto a more consistent cadence. We always aim for one a month, but with as much travel as we're doing, it just hasn't panned out that way. But I think we sometimes too choose our own topics and our own content. And I don't know, I'd love to hear from the people that, that do listen to the show. Like what's valuable for you? What do you want to hear about? I have ideas and opinions and as do PJ and Mary, but
I have no opinions. I just have facts.
Yeah, about that.
But yeah, I think it'd be great if we had like a listener poll, email us at, PJ or Mary or Jason at Community Pulse, and we'd be happy to hear what are the things that what do you want to know about?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things that I'm really working on for the new year and for now as well, because screw making resolutions at the beginning of the year, make them whenever you want to. Anyway, but is just making sure that I'm not in an echo chamber. I think so often we tend to focus on, cool, we're in some of the bigger tech cities, or we work out of the bigger tech cities, or at least engage with people in the bigger tech cities, right? And so like how many of the folks in the Evangelist Collective, the DevRel Slack, are in those bigger tech cities, and how many of them are actually in the quote unquote flyover states, right? Like how many of them are having to deal with technologies that aren't as new and exciting and feel like they don't have as much to talk about, but still have insight into how those communities are working and how they're running and what we can do with them.
Yeah. And while I'm thinking about it, Mary, do you know off the top of your head how many folks we have in our collective now?
I think we're over, I know last time I looked, we were over 600. I think we might be over 700.
Wow.
That's another side project that I really need to devote some time to.
Yeah, so the reason I'm asking is because and I've mentioned this to you, there's been a few people within the past month or so that I've run into who have, for whatever reason, set their sights on evangelism and community efforts as like their next career thing, their next career path.
Right.
People I've run into, at various conferences. We haven't gone into like a deep dive in terms of like why they were looking to switch, but they've asked, where can I learn more about evangelism? And of course I always tell them about the collective, and I still need to get them plugged in there. Got to get them hooked up. But I just thought it seemed like there's a little bit of a trend in like the last quarter of this year where people are definitely more interested I've also had, I get, and I'm sure you guys do also, a ton of people not only asking me about evangelism and what that's like, but also companies coming to me. Usually the question starts with, am I available? Would I come? And it's always a no. I love working at Big Drops. And, but it's cool. It's nice to hear people like coming to folks like us, and asking how they can, how can they be involved and how can they bring in evangelism, whatever that looks like, into their company, and or how can they become an evangelist? And I don't know, it just seems like, for me anyway, from my own direct experience in the past, I would say like 3 months, it's become much more of a conversation in both startups, and if you look at like what's going on over at Microsoft and all of the people, the awesome people that they've brought in this year, which, by the way, I think that could make for a really fun episode, is to try to get those people in there.
Absolutely.
And or on the show. And I don't know, just it's really refreshing and sort of, I'm struggling with words this morning. My coffee hasn't really kicked in, but I feel like not only is it becoming an important role within the company, but it's like the salary seems to be increasing with it. I know a few friends recently that have taken some evangelism jobs, and I feel like I don't have to convince the two of you. This is a hard job. This is probably the hardest job I've ever had. And sometimes comp is tough or tricky to figure out what it should be, what's a fair thing, especially when you're working with a bunch of engineers, and who are likely being paid top of market just to keep them, keep them around, keep them happy. And I think evangelism is getting into the same place, or at least my flavor of evangelism. I can't say that's what it's like across all of dev advocacy and all that kind of thing, but I think
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I feel like we've arrived. Like, it's a thing that is not just a nice to have. It's actually making a big difference within the companies, and they're willing to pay for that, which is kind of, very cool.
Yeah, it's slowly becoming a need to have.
Yes. And so that's one of the interesting things, that part of the reason I'm so excited to be doing stuff out on my own and doing some consulting and contracting right now, is that I'm seeing that and noticing that so many more people are, either they were developers in a past life and they're interested in pursuing dev relations, or they're interested in moving into this field, that type of thing, as well as so many companies that are finally going, oh, hey, we're missing that community bit. We need something there.
Exactly.
And I had a fascinating conversation with a good friend of mine the other day, who was saying, like, I don't think I could ever do the consulting thing because I like being able to dive deep into one particular community. And I told her, I think the thing that I figured out is that this opportunity for me, I'm still diving deep into one community. It's just that community is developer relations. And so, I'm working on finishing out the book about the business value. I'm working on this podcast. I'm working on the collective Slack that we have. All of those types of things that I feel like there aren't the resources for. And, putting out a talk and a blog post and information about, cool, you're interested in DevRel. Here's what it actually looks like. Here's some information about it. Here's how to know whether that's going to be a good fit for you or not. Because I feel like there's so many people who are interested in this topic, and there aren't resources for them. They don't know where to go. There isn't a collection of, like, here's the top information that you should read to figure out if this is right for you. And so I think, while the time is ripe for companies to be bringing more people on, part of what I'm trying to help out with, support, whatever word you want to use, is making sure that once those companies do bring people on into those community roles, that those people are protected, that they're set up for success, that they actually know, that the company actually knows, hey, it's not just we want to bring someone in who's right for this role, but here's how we're going to support them, and here's how we're going to help them in this role, and here's the things that we're going to do to make sure that it's the right fit for them, rather than just bringing in a rock star community person and then going, cool, do your own thing for a few years, and then, oh, wait, no, we can't do any of those things anymore, and taking that all away and then leaving them just treading water, trying to figure out the right thing to do next.
Right. I think you're both kind of touching on kind of two sides of the same coin. Is the idea of evangelism and advocacy in DevRel has really grown And slowly organizations are realizing they have to grow their concept of it as well to be able to maintain it. Which is interesting because, I mean, 2-3 years ago, you would have had a company saying, well, what's the ROI, and what business need are we meeting with this? And they're slowly growing out of that to being like, we know we need this. So that was like, more recently. Then it seems like towards the end of this year, it's more like we need this and we know we need this. How do we sustain it?
Exactly.
Which is interesting because on the other side, what Jason was mentioning is a lot of people wanting to get into DevRel. And the one thing we didn't really touch on is there's actually a lot of people who leave it quite often. It is a hard job. It is, there's no doubt, the travel is brutal. The amount of, I'm just going to say, the amount of shit you have to put up with between like, a crappy conference who isn't communicative and you don't know when you're supposed to show up or if you're even on the schedule, to, just a bad taxi driver who takes you to the wrong place 3 times. Anything in between. And it's like, oh yes, your privileged life must be so difficult. It's like, no, believe me, we know we're privileged. It doesn't make it, that doesn't mean every day is sunshine and lollipops and chess matches and limos. It's not.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to me, having the, at the end of the day, if I'm on the road a lot, if I'm involved in a lot of things, if I'm dealing with a lot of crappy situations like you just named off, PJ, as long as I have a company who understands my value and who understands my worth and can help me out with balancing that workload and making sure that I'm still in a good place at the end of the day, not just the company is still in a good place at the end of the day. If that's an understanding and I have that support and I'm set up for success in that way in the company, I can put up with those other things. And I think the unfortunate thing is there's so many people that I have heard from who are amazing at developer relations, who they're dealing with the crappy stuff at the conferences and the crappy stuff with travel and the burnout from all of that. Plus, they don't have the support from their company. And so they wind up leaving because it's not worth the struggle and it's not worth the burnout that they know that they're going to hit at the end of the day. So I think that's the thing that I'm trying to kind of navigate and figure out a way to find. How do we put some of these things in process? How do we make sure that people understand this is what you need to do in order to do this successbly?
Maybe you should write a blog post about burnout.
Imagine that. Maybe you should go to my website and see my blog post about burnout. By the way, plug for that. MaryGrace.community. You can find my website.
That is a long top level domain.
It is,
community
but it's
is
a hell
long.
of a lot better than asking people to remember how to spell my last name. So you can also go to marythingwall.com. MaryGrace.community is easier. Trust me. But also, yes, so Prompt, which PJ was showing his t-shirt if you're watching the video, is an awesome place that like they're supporting people talking about mental health in tech conferences and in the industry, which is amazing. And I'm so grateful that more of that stuff is being talked about, but we've got a long road ahead of us to make sure that all those people who are so excited about developer relations are actually able to be successful in this role.
Yeah, that's the one thing I definitely always, anybody who comes to me and says, I'm interested, plug me in, who can I talk to? Like, I think this is a direction I want to go in. I always let them know that, burnout's real. There's a lot of people who did this and then just kind of fell off the face of the earth for a little while because they just needed to just completely get away from it because it's really taxing mentally and physically. And the whole burnout thing is top of mind for most of us that have done this for a while. But I will and definitely take a read on Mary's blog on this whole thing because it's got a lot of great stuff. But just my best piece of advice to anybody right now who wants to get into this or wants to create evangelism or DevRel within your company is rule number one. I think you should have, if like you're going to manage this type of thing within, is like just thank your people. Just like give them some credit and just say thank you for everything you're doing, because that right there, if you're not even getting any of that, that's for me, like not me personally, but like that's what I see across the board where people just want to table flip and just give up, is because they're putting everything that they have into it. They're sacrificing time away from home with their family and their pets and their friends and everybody else, and spending weekends and nights working on things, not because they have to, but because they like to and they want to. And then they sort of deliver a thing or just, give a great talk at a conference, but then they go home and it's really, or not home, but back to their office or back to their, conversations with others at work. And there's really not any kind of dialogue or hey, you've been out traveling a ton. Thank you for all your hard work. Like, it makes a ton of difference when I hear those types of things, because if I'm out there just sort of doing my thing, which, as you two know, you become kind of a lone wolf moving around, and then you find your pack and you're there with the conference people. And then you're you're a lone wolf again for a little while. And if you're not hearing from your managers and your coworkers and just, getting some sort of, not praise, but just at least a thank you.
Validation.
Yeah, exactly. Something, then that right there is, you're on a fast track to hating this job and burning out and not wanting to do and have anything to do with it.
And in fairness, this job is not for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to make it sound exclusive, but it takes a certain amount of tenacity just to get over the whole being rejected from CFPs constantly. I think a lot of people see evangelists and they're like, oh, it's so easy for them. They are famous. They're rock stars. They get picked for all the talks. It's like, no, my acceptance rate, it's like 36 to 40%. Like, I get rejected all the time.
Well, and take a step back from that. It's hard to even find the time to submit to all the CFPs.
Yeah, the sheer number of CFPs.
Right? It's hard to create that many talks. It's hard and it's draining to sit there and go, cool, here's the list of things that I need to do for work so that I can pay the bills and check all the boxes for my company. And then also I need to prepare a 30-minute talk for this conference. Right. Like, it's a lot. And that's part of the reason why, and I've been talking about this for a while, and I need to just sit down and do it. So maybe by the time this is live, it'll be done. Because maybe this is the kick in the pants I need. But just writing up a blog post and getting some input from the two of you definitely, and others in the community as well, that's just, look, here's what DevRel is. And doing a pros and cons and the good, bad, and ugly and everything that you need to know. Like, you're looking to get into DevRel, awesome. Here's what you need to know. Here's what you should consider. Cool. You still want to do it? Great. Then here's some resources.
Right.
Here's some people to talk to. Here's some things to follow up on.
So you've decided to DevRel.
Exactly.
But yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I think another thing, maybe this should be a hashtag similar to DevRel for the win, is kind of, DevRel IRL. Pictures of people, stranded at airports when they're trying to get home for the holidays. Pictures of people eating a shitty McDonald's dinner because that's all they have time for.
Sick at an airport trying to get home from an event. Their flight was canceled. That was me last year. This time, woo-hoo.
I slept in last year just a little bit earlier than this. It was in October. I slept in Schiphol. There were mice that ran over my feet. They were doing construction. They were doing construction. Generally, it's like one of my favorite airports. But that in and of itself is a messed up thing. I have a favorite airport. That's not normal. But yeah, right. And I'm going to go back to the term rock star. Everyone always, the dev evangelists are rock stars. The DevRel people are rock stars. Having been a musician in the past, let me tell you that the idea of the rock star lifestyle just is not the case. Like, rock stars have to perform till very late at night. They generally have to stay up and meet with fans until, 2, 3, 4 in the morning. They don't go out and party as much as you think. They usually stumble back to a lonely hotel room, sleep, get up at around 5 or 6, get on a shitty bus with a tiny sleeping space, and go somewhere else. And that's if you're a really good rock star. You might be in a stinky van with 2 other people. That's the true experience. You might be sleeping on couches in basements. That's the true experience. It's not all, yes, for 1 or 2 hours a night, you get to be up on stage and it's glamorous and it's fancy. And I'm not going to lie, I love it. I love it when the lights come on and I see the crowd and they clap because someone said my name. Like, that's the amazing part of the job. The other 23 hours of the day is often kind of shitty. It's flights and cabs and buses and trains and not being late and making sure you're on time and, running up on stage. And no matter what you do, you have to be up there with a smile.
Right.
And that's the tough part of it.
Yeah. This might get me a little bit of crap, but the only reason I'm referencing this song is because I don't know if you're familiar with The Voice or if you watch it.
I tried out to be a contestant on The Voice.
Nice. All right.
That's a whole other story for a whole other podcast.
different podcast. I don't know. So there's a young gal who's on The Voice right now because it's the current season. And she did a riff on Britney Spears' Lucky this past week. And like, I'm not a Britney Spears fan. I couldn't care less about most of her songs, most of her music. The riff that she did, the version that she did of this song was fascinating because it's all about, you know, she's so lucky, she's a star, but she cries because she's thinking, if there's nothing missing in my life, why do these tears come at night?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's so much of that can apply to what you were just saying, PJ, with like, we are lucky. We have a fantastic opportunity. We get to meet really cool people. We get to do a lot of really cool things. We get accolades from the community and everything else. And we've talked about doing a podcast about this as well, and maybe we should this coming year. But there's a lot of times when that can be really lonely.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think part of it as well, you know, we're talking about all the aspects of travel, and there's some folks that travel just isn't for them. And so you get one or two travel, you know, trips into the job and you're sitting there going,
no, thank you.
Right. And I think some of the most successful developer relations teams have figured that out, and they go, cool, this person is really good at travel, is really good at speaking, is really engaged with the community, loves being on the road. Cool. They fill that slot, or there's a few of them that fill that slot. This person is really amazing with answering questions and building out sample applications and helping maintain GitHub libraries and SDKs and all of that. That person fills that slot. So I think we're hitting a point
your content people and your blog people.
Exactly.
Yeah, I guess that's maybe something it's a good point, and maybe something we should do more of pointing out is DevRel or evangelism or community advocate, whatever title or name we want to put on this. It isn't just being on stage. It might not be
right.
Might not be giving talks at all. It might be really just writing technical blog posts. It might be
writing documentation. Yeah,
it might be things that aren't as glamorous, but they're becoming a lot more just of a requirement. Especially within sort of the industry that we're in. APIs are popping up all over the place. People want to be able to like leverage those. Companies want to teach people how to leverage those. So I don't want to like paint this picture of this is a role where you're constantly writing abstracts, submitting CFPs, and traveling to Amsterdam and then giving a talk. Like that's not really how it works. Those are the good days when it works out like that. But it's actually a lot of conversations, a lot of handshakes, a lot of time at the booth, probably trying to recall names of the person that you did meet 2 years ago, and they remember you, but you don't remember them. And there's a lot of like nuance and just sort of things behind the scene. We were talking about how it's hard to not like get sick at some point during the year. But like I'm going to Japan in February for 2 weeks to go snowboarding, and I'm not paying for the airline at all because I have miles from all these trips. So there's like that other side of the thing that sort of makes it all worth it. Well, there's lots of things that make it all worth it, but it is a big spectrum. I've always hated like that rock star sort of mindset of really anything. I mean, in the DevOps community, we try very hard to eradicate the idea of rock star engineers and ninja engineers and all these people. The superhero culture is probably one of the worst things for.
Oh, absolutely. The whole rock star ninja wizard thing.
Yeah. Definitely.
I have a talk that addresses just that. Let me submit it to your CFP. Actually, I think I did. And I think I did that talk at DevOps Days Rockies. But yeah, so we're running a little low on time here. So we should probably wrap it up. So year-end takeaways. You both knew this was coming. You designed the podcast.
It's true. It's true.
If you need me to go first, I will of course go first.
Yeah, go first.
I'm gonna mention two things: one semi-technical, but also musical, and also some suggested reading that has nothing to do with either of that. But we were kind of joking around a little bit about it in the beginning. I don't know if it was when we were recording or not, but Spotify had a really cool feature this year called 2017 Wrapped. So if you're a Spotify user, very cool way to see how many minutes of Spotify you've listened to, what your top tracks were. There's a nice playlist for you. Some of it's not that great. Like the suggested, things you missed out on, the ones that got away playlist is all basically corporate radio crap that they want you to buy. But it is really cool to kind of see your stats, like, see what song you listen to the most. It's a bit interactive. It'll be like, what do you think it is? What do we think it is? Let's see if we
BJ
meet
and
someone.
I have very different music preferences, turns
Yeah.
out. In case you couldn't guess that.
One of us has amazing music taste.
I completely agree. Thanks,
what?
BJ.
I'm dropping the sentence right there.
Oh,
Just one of us has amazing music taste. But yeah, no, it's very cool. And if you're on Spotify, you're probably going to get an email or something like that letting you know. If not, look, just Google 2017 Wrapped Spotify and it'll show you. The other thing that I wanted to mention was I read this amazing book this year. It took me months, and I'm generally a fast reader, but this was a 600-some page book called A Distant Mirror, and it was a Pulitzer Prize winning book by Barbara, I believe it's pronounced Tuckman, and it's actually about 14th century France. And the thing that made the book interesting was it talks about the plague, and it talks about various political things that were going on and how the plague affected that and kind of the ruling class. And what made it interesting, what made it such a great read was the comparison of the way things are going today, whether that be in corporate life or, in politics, and kind of it's amazing that this is 700, 800 years ago and not much has changed, kind of in a sad way. But it's definitely interesting to kind of get that glimpse of life. So definitely I recommend it. A Distant Mirror by Barbara Tuckman. I'll add the links into the notes so that we have them. But yeah, those are my takeaways from 2017.
Cool. I'll go next. So I mentioned to these guys earlier, I don't think we were recording yet, but I, through a series of unfortunate circumstances, have a brand new laptop, which isn't a bad thing. But one of the things that I love about getting new laptops is the choosing of the stickers which will go on them. And years ago, I decided that I couldn't do stickers from conferences on my laptop because I always got so bummed when I lost them. So those now go on a shipping envelope that is my laptop sleeve, and then I can reuse those. That's a whole other topic. But anyway, I usually go on Amazon and find 2 or 3, one that's big for the outside, and then 2 or 3 that go on the inside. And I stumbled on one this year that is fairly simple, and it just says, "Do what you love what you do." And I'm sure we've all heard that phrase before. I'm sure we're all familiar with it. It's been hitting me a lot harder this year, just from the aspect of, I live an incredibly privileged life that I am able to take this time and do things on my own. And I have the runway to be able to do that, and a partner who supports me, who is hugely supportive as well. But at the end of the day, if I don't love what I'm doing, it's not worth it, because it takes too much of my time. It takes too much of my effort, too much of my energy. And so just really focusing on, taking stock of the things that I'm involved in, the things that I'm doing on a regular basis, and figuring out, is that thing really worth it? Am I really actually enjoying it? And if not, set it aside for a time. And sometimes it's not just for a time, it's permanently. But figuring out what are those things that I actually truly love that are going to give me the energy that I need to get through the day and help prevent burnout. So that's been one of the biggest things, and I love that I have a sticker that's reminding me of that. My guilty pleasure right now, I mentioned it earlier, is probably The Voice. I love the premise of the show. I love how they approach it. I love the performances. It's a nice end of the day. I don't need to pay attention super hard, but they capture my attention, and it's fun to watch. So those are my things for right now.
And in case, because I did mention that I was on the show, I get quite a few emails. I wasn't on the show. I tried out for the show. But I do get quite a few emails. And if you are interested in looking into The Voice, their auditions for next season are already starting.
Nice.
Cool. Well, so for me, I think I definitely want to echo what you just said, Mary. I think the reflection time has been kind of a key thing for me. This is my 4th year of evangelizing. I feel like, I don't know, which feels like twice as long as what I probably should have done. And
it's definitely twice as long as the average.
Yeah.
Yep, you've got the 18 months beat, that's for sure.
Yeah. So there's not a lot of time for reflection time when you're sitting on the airplane sometimes, and I'm, I got my nose in a book or whatever, and my mind starts to wander, but I really don't, I don't know, like it's so important. And I think I'm getting better at it, but it's something we don't maybe spend a lot of time thinking about. What is it that we like to do about, within this job, within evangelism community roles, what do we really like doing? What do we don't like doing? I've been approached about, helping out in different areas with like business development or product marketing. And there's other, other things I could contribute to at VictorOps, and I'm sure, it would be fine. But, I was just telling you two before we started recording here, today I'm giving sort of a year-end review, year-end DevOps wrap up to the company at VictorOps later this afternoon. And so I've had some time to like think about, the year and what's going on. And I don't know, like I never really give myself a chance to do that, but it's good. And I think important for us to make sure, as I'm putting together these slides, which is only going to be, witnessed by, just VictorOps, I'm thinking to myself, this is what I'm good at. This is what I like doing. I'm like thinking about what big ideas can I share with people and get their gears turning. I don't know. It sounds stupid, but I actually enjoy like putting together talks. And I think if you're going to be a speaker, like that's important. If you can't stand putting, the idea of like building another deck, then you're probably not, this isn't going to be good for you.
Maybe this isn't for you.
Yeah. And I'm not saying you have to love PowerPoint. I never use PowerPoint. You don't have to, it's not about the tool. It's about communicating information to people, and however you want to do that is totally, the creative process for you. But yeah, I think it's important to make sure that what you're doing, you actually love. And I've had to sort of do a little bit of a soul searching and sort of gut check with myself as we get into the end of the year and thinking about, 2018 and what's going to happen then. I have to make sure, and I think all of us have to make sure that this is really the direction we want to go. And I feel like you two, specifically in the last, 6 months or so, have made some really tough decisions to make sure that you still love what you're doing. You're still in this space, in this sort of slice of tech, but you're doing it on your terms. And I know it's harder. I can tell. There's a lot more involved when you kind of go off on your own, but seems like both of you are very happy. And I think that that's something all of us should strive for. So reflection time, I think, is a big thing. Something completely different, but very important, and I think has been a positive sign from my vantage point, is sort of the diversity constructs of our community evangelism and efforts and all that thing. I feel like I've seen a lot more women and just people of sort of different backgrounds and walks of life, and I think that that's really good. And I feel I have to give all of us a pat on the back for really sort of encouraging more people to bring their voices in and making it a safer space for people to want to submit talks. And that's not something that just sort of happens naturally. And there are a lot of people within our community, I would say everyone within our community, who's very welcoming and very encouraging. And you can, like I mentioned earlier, the stuff that's going on over at Microsoft, they've now hired in some of the top women evangelists in the world. And I think that's an important thing to pay attention to and note and continue. I think all of us should do that. Some of my best friends within the sort of evangelism space are trying very hard to sort of make sure everybody feels welcome, and it's a very diverse voice that we have. So I think that's important. But then on the other side of that coin too, obviously we see it in the news almost every day now. Somebody else has harassed somebody.
No kidding.
And so far it's been mostly men who have harassed women or children, which is terrible. And I think that's something that it's kind of, it sucks. We hate to hear about any of this stuff, but I feel like we're taking a little bit of our own medicine here just by having the conversations about it. And it's not just men that are harassing women, it's women harassing men. I don't think that gets raised as much.
Yeah.
But the fact that these are conversations, and they're tough conversations, but they're coming up, I think is, it's that you have to take your medicine thing. Like, this is something we actually have to talk about and deal with.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's not just in like, politics, and it's not just in like,
Hollywood
people, it's just, it's everywhere. And it's something
day-to-day life.
I mean, yeah. And just like, the Time magazine, I think they just came out, the People of the Year, like they've highlighted the importance of that. So it's a theme, it's a thread that runs through a lot of different areas, and it's not, we're no different. Our industry has this stuff too. So it's something we have to speak up and point out. And
I think it goes back to, the expectations that we have of our community, and the expectations that we have of the people that we surround ourselves with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is total tangent, but related to what you were just talking about, I actually completely agree that it's not just men, it's women as well. We had an interesting experience walking through Nashville. I was crossing a street and someone grabbed my butt, and I went, what? And like turned my head around, and this woman and her girlfriend are standing behind us, walking across the street behind us, and she kind of winks at me and keeps going. And I had this moment of like, hang on, what just happened? And also
scratch.
like, right. But it took me a second to get to a point where I was like, no, that's just as not okay as if it had been a man. And it's the same impact to me. It's the same experience. It's the same feeling.
Same level of violation.
Exactly. And so I think more so than, we need to be telling men, hey, what you're doing is not cool. But overall, we need to be telling people in general, stop and think about what you're doing. Stop and think about the way that you're treating people. Stop and think about the way that you're talking and the way that you're referring to people. Robin Bergeron had a tweet thread last night. She's down at KubeCon right now. And I would encourage you to go back and look at it. I'll try and put it in the show notes. I'll see if I can find it. About just, what it's been like being at an open source conference, and her experiences talking to people who are just bashing the work and bashing the other open source projects that people have dedicated time, sometimes their own time outside of work that they aren't getting paid for, and their livelihood to. And just this realization of, we've got to be more empathetic. We've got to be more kind. We've got to be more aware of what we're saying, what we're doing, how we're talking, what we're focused on, and what our priorities are. So I think it's an interesting concept that can apply to a lot of different things.
Yeah, it's a cultural thing too. A lot of it, we travel all over the place, and it's better in certain pockets of the country or certain pockets of the world, and it's way worse in others. And it's
absolutely.
I think it has a lot to do with your surroundings. It has a lot to do with how you're raised. Has a lot to do with types of movies and TV shows and music. Like we're just bombarded with things from all directions, but it is comforting to know that we feel comfortable having these conversations and continuing to have these conversations, and just make sure that, because I think a lot of people would recognize when, if like I had seen, Mary, that interaction happen to you 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, I wouldn't really thought much about it. I've been like, well, that was kind of weird, and I hope.
Right.
But now I would be, if I would have saw it, I would have said, I probably would have said something. Mm-hmm. And I think that more and more of us are getting to that place where we recognize things that, it wasn't blatantly harmful, but there was something there was not right, and we're okay pointing that out now.
Right.
We're more comfortable pointing that out.
Yeah. And I think as a commendation, I think that's the right word I'm looking for, exhortation to other developer relations folks, other community managers out there, like we're on the forefront of a lot of things. We're the ones that are often writing the codes of conduct and enforcing them and making sure that those standards and those expectations are in place. Mm-hmm. And I encourage us to take this a step further and not just make sure that we aren't being rude and we aren't violating people's personal space and everything else, but that we're setting the example of how people should be acting, because we are often on stage. We are often all over the country in all different places dealing with all sorts of different people. And so for us to kind of take that mantle on and hold ourselves to a higher standard so that we can show what should be happening in the community to the folks that we're serving in the community.
And maybe that's the wrap up point to kind of bring everything together. You know, we are, and pun fully intended, we are the voice. We are the ones up on stage. We are the ones with the platform. We are the ones who should be using it to make things better. Mm-hmm. And if you're not, then to go back to, we've said it so many times, maybe DevRel is not for you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So on that note, since we've gone, I think, for an hour now, it's going to be a very long episode. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Community Pulse. I am PJ Haggerty, and you can find me at Asplenic on Twitter.
I'm Mary Thingvall. You can find me at Mary_Grace on Twitter.
And I'm Jason Hand, also on Twitter at Jason Hand.
Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you in 2018.
Bye.